Human Janitor hummed while mopping, not knowing the alien princess only slept to his voice. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The gentle swish of a mop across polished floors echoed through the empty corridors of the Galactic Embassy on Earth. The janitor, Blake Turner, moved with practiced efficiency, his voice carrying a tune that had no name. Blake had been working the night shift at the Galactic Embassy for 3 years now. At 42, with salt and pepper hair and laugh lines that spoke of a life well lived despite its hardships, he wasn't where he'd imagined he'd be. But after his construction business had collapsed during the economic fallout of First Contact, cleaning the gleaming halls where aliens and humans forged interstellar relations paid the bills. And Blake had always believed that honest work was honest work. Tonight was like any other night. The diplomats and delegates had retreated to their quarters or returned to their ships. The massive complex, with its soaring ceilings designed to accommodate species of all sizes, fell into its nighttime hush. Blake pushed his cart down the eastern wing, where the Velosian delegation resided. The Velosians had arrived on Earth 8 months ago. Tall, willowy beings with iridescent skin that shifted colors with their moods, they were among the most reserved of the galactic species. Their royal family led their delegation, a rarity in interstellar diplomacy. Earth had pulled out all stops to accommodate them, desperate for the advanced medical technology the Velosians possessed. Blake hummed as he worked, an old folk song his grandfather had taught him. The melody rose and fell, filling the cavernous space with its simple beauty. He didn't consider himself much of a singer, but alone in the empty hallways, he let his voice roam free. What Blake couldn't know, was that behind the ornate door of the Velosian royal suite, Princess Seraphina lay awake. The young heir to the Velosian throne had not slept properly in nearly 2 years. On their home planet, the royal family slept in sacred pools fed by the harmonically resonant waters of ancient caves. Without them, deep regenerative sleep was impossible for Velosian royalty. The lack of proper rest was slowly killing her. Seraphina's skin, once a brilliant tapestry of blues and purples, had faded to a dull gray. Her mind, renowned across 3-star systems for its brilliance, was growing foggy. The royal physicians had tried everything: synthetic harmonics, imported water, even experimental sleep devices. Nothing worked. Until 3 months ago, when Blake Turner had started cleaning the eastern wing. The first night she heard him, Seraphina had been staring at her ornate ceiling, resigned to another night of exhausted wakefulness. Then, faintly at first, a sound had drifted through the ventilation system. A human voice, carrying a melody unlike anything in the vast Velosian musical archives. Something about the particular timbre, the natural imperfections, the unpredictable variations. It resonated with her Velosian physiology in a way nothing else had. That night, Princess Seraphina had slept for 6 full hours. When she woke, her skin showed hints of color for the first time in months. Night after night, she waited for the sound. Sometimes it came. Sometimes the janitor took a different route. On those nights, she remained awake, her condition deteriorating further. But she told no one of her discovery. The complex politics of her position made it impossible. Velosians valued self-sufficiency above all else. To admit dependency on a human, and not just any human, but one of low social status, would be unthinkable. It could destabilize the already fragile negotiations with Earth, negotiations that her people desperately needed to succeed. So the princess suffered in silence, cherishing the nights when the janitor's humming would drift through her walls, bringing blessed relief. Tonight, as Blake's melody reached her, Seraphina felt her muscles begin to relax. Her eyelids grew heavy. The colors in her skin brightened slightly, rippling from gray to a pale lavender. She drifted toward sleep, gratitude filling her heart for this unknowing human whose simple song was saving her life. But tonight would be different. As Blake neared the end of the hallway, the door to the Velosian royal suite slid open. He stopped, mop suspended mid-stroke. No one ever emerged during his shift. A tall Velosian male stepped out, his skin a deep, concerned orange. Ambassador Thorin, the princess's royal guard and cousin. His eyes fixed on Blake with an intensity that made the janitor take a step back. You, human, what is your designation? The Velosian's voice was melodic even in the harsh human language. Blake cleared his throat, suddenly aware of his worn uniform and the gray in his hair. Blake Turner, sir. Night Janitor for the Eastern Wing. Ambassador Thorin's eyes narrowed, the orange of his skin deepening. You were producing vocal harmonics. It wasn't a question, but Blake answered anyway. Just humming, sir. Helps pass the time. I can stop if it's disturbing anyone. The Velosian's expression was unreadable. Follow me, Blake Turner. It wasn't a request. Blake glanced at his mop cart, then back at the imposing alien. Should I? Leave it. This is a matter of urgency. Blake's heart raced as he followed Ambassador Thorin down the corridor toward a restricted area he had never entered. What had he done wrong? Was humming while working some kind of interstellar offense? He'd completed all the cultural sensitivity training when he was hired, but maybe something had changed. His mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. Would he be fired? Arrested? Were there interplanetary laws against disturbing alien dignitaries? They passed through several security checkpoints, Thorin's royal credentials clearing the way. Blake felt increasingly out of place, his janitor's uniform standing out against the opulence of the deeper embassy sections. Finally, they entered a chamber unlike anything Blake had ever seen. The ceiling soared at least 30 feet high, with delicate crystalline structures hanging like exotic chandeliers. The walls shimmered with what appeared to be liquid light in shifting patterns. In the center stood a group of Velosians, their skin colors ranging from deep purple to agitated red. At the sight of Blake, they fell silent. An older Velosian with elaborate markings on his face stepped forward. Blake recognized him from the news feeds. King Zephus, the Velosian monarch. Blake's mouth went dry. Is this the one? The king demanded. Ambassador Thorin bowed slightly. Yes, Your Radiance. I confirmed it myself. This is the human who produces the harmonics. King Zephus approached Blake, studying him with ancient eyes. Do you know why you are here, Blake Turner of Earth? Blake swallowed hard. No, Your Radiance. I was just doing my job. If I violated some protocol. You have done nothing wrong, the king interrupted. In fact, you may have done something extraordinary. He turned to the group. Leave us. Only the royal physician and Ambassador Thorin shall remain. The room cleared quickly. Blake stood frozen, acutely aware of his work boots leaving marks on what was probably priceless flooring. Blake Turner. The king continued once they were alone. My daughter, Princess Seraphina, heir to the Velosian throne, is dying. Blake blinked in surprise. I'm very sorry to hear that, Your Radiance, but I don't understand what this has to do with me. The king's skin shifted to a somber blue. For reasons we cannot explain, your vocal harmonics, what you call humming, appears to have a unique effect on her physiology. On the nights you work near her quarters, she is able to achieve the deep regenerative sleep our species requires. Without it, she has been slowly dying. Blake's mind reeled. My humming helps her sleep? That's impossible. The royal physician, a slender Velosian with clinical gray skin, stepped forward. It is unexpected, but not impossible. Our species responds to certain harmonic frequencies. Yours appears to match an extremely rare resonance pattern. The pattern, King Zephus added, that was once produced by our sacred sleeping pools, now lost to us due to environmental degradation on our homeworld. Blake ran a hand through his hair, trying to process what he was hearing. So my grandfather's old folk songs just happen to match some alien frequency that helps the princess sleep? The universe is vast and full of unexpected connections, the king said. We detected the correlation through her medical monitoring systems. Her vital signs improved dramatically when you were working near her quarters. What exactly are you asking of me? Blake felt a prickle of unease. King Zephus straightened to his full height, nearly 7 feet tall. I am not asking, Blake Turner. I am offering. The princess cannot return to our homeworld in her weakened state, yet she must be present for the final negotiations with your government. These talks will benefit both our worlds immensely. Ambassador Thorin interjected. What His Radiance means to say is that we wish to employ your services directly. You would be compensated far beyond your current salary. To do what exactly? Blake asked, though he was beginning to understand. The king's skin rippled with an emotion Blake couldn't identify. To use your voice to help my daughter sleep. Nothing more. 2 hours each night, in a specially prepared chamber adjacent to her quarters. Complete privacy and security would be provided. Blake let out a long breath. Part of him wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all. A janitor being hired to sing alien royalty to sleep? But the grave expressions on the Volosians' faces stopped him. And if I refuse? He asked quietly. The king's skin darkened. Then we continue to search for alternatives while my daughter's condition worsens. We do not force service, Blake Turner. That is not our way. Blake thought of his empty apartment, the bills that kept piling up despite his 2 jobs, the daughter in college he could barely help support. He thought of his grandfather, who had taught him those songs on summer evenings under the stars, telling him that music was the universal language. How universal, indeed. I'll do it, Blake said. But I have conditions. Ambassador Thorin's skin flashed with surprise, then approval. The king merely nodded. Name them. I keep my regular job. Whatever this is, it's in addition to, not instead of. I've worked hard to get where I am. The king inclined his head. Acceptable. And I want to know exactly what's happening. No secrets. If I'm somehow affecting the princess's health, I need to understand how and why. Our physicians will explain everything in detail, the king agreed. Last thing, Blake said, surprising himself with his boldness. I have a daughter in college. Her name is Emma. Her tuition is due, and I'm coming up short. I want her education fully funded. The request hung in the air. Ambassador Thorin shifted uncomfortably, but King Zephyr's expression remained unchanged. A father who values his offspring's education, the king said finally. This is something we understand well. It shall be arranged, with additional stipend for her living expenses. Blake extended his hand, then quickly retracted it, remembering the cultural briefing about Volosian touching taboos. But to his surprise, King Zephyr reached out and clasped his hand firmly. Our worlds have more in common than differences, Blake Turner. Perhaps that is why your voice brings healing to my daughter. That night marked the beginning of the strangest chapter in Blake Turner's life. After completing his regular cleaning rounds, he would be escorted to a specially prepared chamber next to the princess's quarters. The room was designed to amplify and channel his voice through a sophisticated system that regulated its transmission into the royal suite. Blake never saw Princess Seraphina. The Volosian royal protocols forbade direct contact. But each night, he would sit in that strange room with its alien acoustics, and he would sing. He started with the folk songs his grandfather had taught him, then expanded to other melodies he remembered from his youth. When he ran out of songs, he began to create his own, simple tunes that came from somewhere deep within him. Unknown to Blake, on the other side of the wall, the princess's health was steadily improving. Her skin regained its vibrant colors, her mind cleared, and her strength returned. The royal physicians were astounded by her recovery. Seraphina herself became increasingly curious about the human whose voice had such power. She requested information about him, learning of his struggles after first contact, his failed business, his devotion to his daughter. She felt a growing connection to this human she had never met, whose voice had become her lifeline. 1 month into this arrangement, as Blake sang a particularly soulful rendition of an old Earth ballad, an alarm suddenly blared throughout the embassy. The sound of running footsteps echoed down the corridor. Ambassador Thorin burst into Blake's chamber, his skin a panicked yellow. We must move you immediately. There has been a security breach. What's happening? Blake asked, rising to his feet. A faction opposed to our alliance with Earth has infiltrated the embassy. They seek to disrupt the negotiations by any means necessary. Thorin's voice was tight, including harm to the royal family. The implications hit Blake like a physical blow. The princess is being secured by her guards. But we must move you to a safe location as well. Your connection to her recovery must remain secret. If our enemies discovered it. He didn't need to finish the thought. Blake followed him through a hidden door into a narrow service corridor he'd never known existed despite years of working in the building. They had barely gone 20 paces when an explosion rocked the embassy. Blake was thrown against the wall, his ears ringing. Through the haze of dust and emergency lights, he saw Ambassador Thorin slumped on the floor, a section of fallen ceiling pinning his lower body. "Go," Thorin gasped, his skin flickering weakly between yellow and gray. Second junction, left passage. Secure room. Blake hesitated only a moment before kneeling beside the injured Volosian. "I'm not leaving you." "You must," Thorin insisted. "If the dissidents find you, they will use you against the princess." Another explosion, closer this time, made the decision for him. Blake reached down and, with strength born of adrenaline, heaved the debris off Thorin's legs. The alien skin flashed white with pain. "Put your arm around my shoulder," Blake ordered, all protocol forgotten. "We're going together." Half carrying, half dragging the ambassador, Blake navigated the twisting service corridor, following Thorin's gasped directions. They reached the second junction just as shouts echoed behind them. Harsh, angry voices in the flowing Volosian language. Blake helped Thorin into the left passage and sealed the door behind them. Ahead was another door, heavier and marked with Volosian security symbols. "Code?" Blake asked urgently. Thorin's voice was fading. Voice, pattern, royal blood. Blake's heart sank. The door required Volosian royal authorization. They were trapped. The sounds of pursuit grew louder. The door behind them wouldn't hold for long. Blake looked around desperately for another escape route, but the passage was a dead end. Then a thought struck him. Crazy, impossible, but worth trying. He began to hum. Not just any tune, but the specific melody he had been singing when the attack began. The one that had seemed to resonate most strongly according to the monitoring equipment in his chamber. For several tense seconds, nothing happened. The voices behind them grew louder. Blake could hear something heavy being used against the door they had just passed through. Then, with a soft chime, the security door slid open. Inside was a small, austere room with another door on the far side. Blake dragged Thorin inside, and the security door sealed itself behind them. "How did you?" Thorin began. "Lucky guess," Blake replied, though he suspected it was something more. Perhaps the security system had been programmed to recognize the harmonic pattern that had been healing the princess. Perhaps something about his voice itself triggered the recognition protocols. The far door opened, revealing a Volosian security team with weapons drawn. Behind them, wearing a simple white garment that did nothing to diminish her regal bearing, stood a young Volosian female whose skin shimmered with vibrant purples and blues. Princess Serafina. For a moment, no one moved. Then the princess stepped forward, her eyes fixed not on her injured cousin, but on Blake. "You are the one," she said, her voice musical and clear. "The human whose voice brings sleep and healing." Blake found himself speechless, looking directly into the royal face he had never expected to see. He managed a clumsy bow. "Blake Turner, Your Highness. Knight Janitor." The princess smiled, and her skin rippled with colors too complex for Blake to name. "Today, Blake Turner, you are much more than that." She turned to her guards. "Get Ambassador Thorin to medical immediately, and bring Mr. Turner to the secure conference room." The attack was a coordinated effort to disrupt tomorrow's treaty signing. "My father will want to speak with him." As the guards moved to obey, the princess looked at Blake once more. "Your voice saved my life, Blake Turner. And now, it seems, it has saved you as well. Perhaps there is more to this connection than we understood." Blake could only nod, his world transformed in ways he was only beginning to comprehend. The simple janitor who hummed while mopping had somehow become entangled in intergalactic politics, royal health crises, and now an apparent assassination attempt. Yet as he followed the princess's guards deeper into the secure area of the embassy, Blake realized that the folk songs his grandfather had taught him under the stars had connected him to something far beyond Earth. For the first time since first contact had upended his life, he felt a sense of purpose and wonder returning. Behind them, the sounds of battle continued as embassy security forces engaged the infiltrators. But Blake Turner, his janitor's uniform dusty from fallen debris, walked forward with a straight back and a curious sense that his life's path had just taken a turn that his grandfather, with all his talk of music reaching to the stars, could never have imagined. What neither Blake nor the Volosians yet realized was that the connection between his voice and the princess went far deeper than mere harmonic resonance. A truth that would soon reshape not just their lives, but the future of human-Volosian relations entirely. The secure conference room was unlike any place Blake had ever been. The walls seemed alive with flowing patterns of light, responding to the movements and perhaps even the emotions of those within. King Zephus sat at the head of a crescent-shaped table, his skin a troubled mix of deep blue and flashes of red. Around him gathered his advisors and security chiefs, their colors similarly agitated. When Blake entered, escorted by royal guards, all eyes turned to him. He resisted the urge to straighten his janitor's uniform or brush away the dust from the explosion. "Blake Turner," the king acknowledged, "your assistance in Ambassador Thorin's rescue is noted with gratitude." Blake nodded awkwardly. "How is he?" "He will recover," the king replied. "Volosian physiology is resilient." Princess Seraphina entered behind Blake, and the atmosphere in the room subtly shifted. The advisors' skins rippled with respectful colors. The king's expression softened momentarily. "Father," the princess said, "I believe we must tell him everything." King Zephus's skin darkened. "Daughter, the council has not approved." "The dissidents already know," she interrupted, a bold move that sent ripples of surprise through the assembled Volosians. "That is why they attacked tonight. They targeted the specific corridor between Blake Turner's singing chamber and my quarters. They knew." Blake looked between father and daughter, sensing the tension. "Knew what exactly?" The princess turned to him, her eyes, multi-layered organs that seemed to shift and refocus as she looked at him, full of an emotion he couldn't name. "The true nature of our connection," she said simply. A Volosian with the markings of a senior scientist rose. "Your radiance, if I may explain?" At the king's nod, he approached Blake with a small device that projected a three-dimensional image in the air between them. "This is Volosian DNA," the scientist explained, indicating a complex, spiraling structure unlike anything in human biology textbooks. "And this," he continued as a second structure appeared alongside it, "is yours, Blake Turner. We sampled it from your workspace." Blake frowned. "You took my DNA without permission?" "Standard security protocols," the king interjected. "All embassy personnel are screened." The scientist continued, "Observe this section." The display zoomed in on a tiny portion of both DNA strands. To Blake's untrained eye, they looked nothing alike. One was orderly and geometric, the other organic and flowing. But then the scientist manipulated the display, and a small segment of each began to glow. "These sections," the scientist said, "are identical." Blake stared in disbelief. "That's impossible. We evolved on different planets, in different solar systems." "Indeed," the scientist agreed. "And yet, the evidence is undeniable. This particular genetic sequence is unique among both our species. It has never been documented in any Volosian except the royal bloodline. And according to your planet's genetic databases, it appears in less than 0.001% of humans." Princess Seraphina stepped forward. "What the esteemed scientist is trying to explain, Blake Turner, is that you and I share a genetic marker that should not exist across our species. This marker is what allows your voice to trigger my neurological sleep patterns. It is also what allowed you to open the security door, which is coded to royal genetic signatures." Blake sat heavily in the nearest chair, protocol forgotten. "How is this possible?" King Zephus sighed, his skin shifting to a deep, somber purple. "That is the question that has consumed our scientists since we discovered the connection. The implications are profound. Our leading theory, the scientist continued, involves ancient contact between our worlds. Long before recorded history on either planet, when both our species were in early developmental stages. Blake's mind raced. You're saying that humans and Volosians interbred? Thousands of years ago. The room fell silent. The king and princess exchanged a look. Not just any humans and Volosians, the princess said quietly. My royal ancestors and your direct lineage, Blake Turner. The revelation hit Blake like a physical blow. He, a janitor struggling to pay his daughter's college tuition, shared blood with alien royalty? It was too absurd to comprehend. Yet it explained why the dissidents had attacked tonight, on the eve of the treaty signing. If word got out that Volosian royalty shared DNA with humans, the conservative factions would use it to undermine the alliance. Some might even question the purity of the royal line itself. The connection goes beyond genetics, the princess continued. The folk songs you sing, their melodic patterns match ancient Volosian sleep rituals documented in our oldest archives. Rituals we had dismissed as symbolic until now. Blake thought of his grandfather, teaching him those songs under the stars. My grandfather said the songs came from the old country. I always thought he meant Ireland. A quiet chuckle rippled through the room, breaking the tension. Perhaps, the king said with surprising warmth, he meant a much older country indeed. The meeting continued late into the night. Security reports confirmed that the dissidents had been captured or driven off. The embassy was being secured floor by floor. Ambassador Thorin was in stable condition and expected to make a full recovery. But the larger questions remained. What to do about the genetic discovery and how to proceed with the treaty in light of it. The dissidents know something of our connection, the princess argued. If we try to hide it, they will simply reveal it in their own way, twisted to serve their agenda. If we announce it, daughter, the king countered, we risk destabilizing not just the treaty, but our entire society. Our lineage has been pure for thousands of cycles. Blake, who had been quiet for some time, finally spoke. With respect, Your Radiance, I think you're missing an opportunity here. All eyes turned to him, and Blake felt suddenly self-conscious. But he pressed on. If I understand correctly, your conservatives fear closer ties with Earth because they see humans as alien, different, lesser. What stronger argument for alliance could there be than proof that our species are already connected? That somewhere in our distant past, we were one. The princess's skin brightened with approval. The janitor speaks wisdom, father. Former contractor, Blake corrected with a slight smile. I built things before first contact crashed the economy. The king considered Blake thoughtfully. You suggest we embrace this discovery? I suggest you use it, Blake said. Not as a scandal to be managed, but as the foundation for something new. Something stronger than a mere treaty. The king's skin shifted to a contemplative blue. Your proposal has merit, but the announcement must be carefully managed. The genetic evidence presented in the proper context. I have an idea about that, the princess said, her eyes on Blake. The next morning, as diplomats and officials from a dozen worlds gathered in the embassy's grand hall for the treaty signing, rumors of the previous night's attack circulated in anxious whispers. Security was visibly heightened, with both human and Volosian guards stationed throughout the room. King Zephys entered with his full entourage, Princess Seraphina at his side. Her transformation was remarkable. Where she had been weak and faded just weeks earlier, she now radiated health and vibrancy, her skin a tapestry of royal blues and purples. The human Secretary-General greeted the Volosian delegation with formal bows. We are relieved you are safe, Your Radiance. The attack was a cowardly attempt to undermine the peace we build today. King Zephys inclined his head. Indeed, but from attempted sabotage, we have discovered an unexpected foundation for our alliance. He turned to the assembly. Before we sign the treaty, I wish to share a discovery that changes how we must view our species' relationship. A murmur ran through the crowd. This was not part of the planned ceremony. Last night's attack targeted a specific individual, the king continued. A human whose unique genetic signature proved key to my daughter's recovery from a life-threatening condition. In studying this connection, our scientists made an astonishing discovery. He gestured, and Blake Turner, no longer in his janitor's uniform but dressed in a simple yet elegant suit, stepped forward from where he had been waiting quietly at the side of the hall. This man, Blake Turner of Earth, carries a genetic marker identical to one found only in the Volosian royal bloodline. A marker that should not exist across our different species, yet undeniably does. The hall erupted in shocked whispers. Human diplomats exchanged bewildered glances. Several Volosian officials' skins flashed with alarm. Princess Serafina stepped forward. Our scientists can only conclude that somewhere in our distant past, long before our written histories, Volosians and humans had contact, and that contact left a genetic legacy that connects our worlds to this day. The king raised his hands for silence. Rather than hide this truth, we choose to embrace it, to recognize that our species' destinies have been intertwined far longer than we knew. He turned to Blake. Blake Turner, your voice healed my daughter when our most advanced medicine could not. Your shared genetic heritage opened doors meant only for Volosian royalty. Today, we acknowledge that connection formally. A Volosian official brought forward an ornate box. From it, the king removed a small, crystalline emblem. By royal decree, you and your descendants are recognized as distant kin to the throne of Valos, not in line of succession, but as honored blood relations. He placed the emblem in Blake's hand. This marks you as family to our family, world to our world. Blake stood stunned, the crystal warm in his palm. He could feel the weight of history, both human and alien, pressing down on him. He thought of his grandfather singing those ancient songs, of his daughter Emma and the future she would inherit. Thank you, your radiance, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. I accept this honor not just for myself, but for all humans who look to the stars and wonder if we're alone. Today proves that we never truly were. The princess stepped forward then, her skin shimmering with emotion. To demonstrate the reality of our connection, I asked Blake Turner to share the gift that saved my life. Blake understood. They had rehearsed this moment in the early hours of the morning. He closed his eyes and began to sing, not humming now, but giving full voice to one of the oldest songs his grandfather had taught him. A haunting melody that spoke of distant shores and the promise of return. As the notes filled the grand hall, the princess's skin began to glow, not with the colors of sleep, but with something more vibrant. The crystal in Blake's hand responded, illuminating with the same patterns. Around the room, the assembled Volosians reacted with astonishment, their skins flickering with recognition. Even those who had been skeptical could not deny the evidence of their senses. Something in the human song resonated with their deepest cellular memory. When Blake finished, the silence was profound. This, King Zephus said into that silence, is the true foundation of the treaty we signed today. Not merely diplomatic necessity or economic advantage, but a recognition of ancient kinship rediscovered. He turned to the Secretary General. Let us proceed with the signing, not as separate species forging new bonds, but as long-sundered branches of a shared heritage, finding our way back to each other. The treaty signing proceeded with a new sense of solemnity and significance. Blake stood to one side, still processing the morning's events. The crystal emblem in his pocket seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Princess Serafina approached him as the diplomats dispersed into smaller groups for the reception that followed. Blake Turner, she said, her voice melodic in the human language. You have handled this transition with remarkable grace. Blake smiled wryly. Just a week ago, I was mopping floors at night and worrying about bills. Now I'm supposedly related to alien royalty. Grace is the best I can manage. The princess's skin rippled with what he was learning to recognize as amusement. Your life will change significantly. Are you prepared for that? Probably not, Blake admitted. But my daughter is ecstatic. She's already been offered a position in the xenobiology department at her university, studying our genetic connection. And you? The princess asked. What will you do with this new status? Blake considered the question. Your father mentioned ambassador training. Apparently, I have a knack for interspecies relations. He paused. But I'm keeping my night job, at least for now. Something satisfying about making things clean and orderly. And the singing? There was genuine interest in her multifaceted eyes. That continues too. Doctor's orders, apparently. He smiled. Your royal physician was quite clear that your treatments should continue for at least another year. Her skin deepened to a rich, warm purple. I find I sleep better with your songs, Blake Turner. Even now that my health is restored. Before Blake could respond, Ambassador Thorne approached, moving carefully but showing remarkable recovery from his injuries. His skin glowed with formal greens and golds. The human and Velosian press await, Your Highness, he said. The king requests your presence for the official announcement. The princess nodded. We come. She turned back to Blake. Ready to face the cameras, distant cousin? Blake straightened his tie, a gesture that felt insignificant against the magnitude of what was happening. As ready as I'll ever be. Together, they walked toward the press briefing, a human janitor and an alien princess, connected by an ancient genetic quirk and the simple power of a song hummed in empty hallways. That night, after the cameras and the questions and the endless diplomatic formalities, Blake found himself back in the eastern wing of the embassy. Not as part of his janitorial duties, but as an invited guest in a small gathering in the Velosian royal suite. King Zephus raised a crystal goblet containing a luminescent Velosian beverage that had been carefully tested for human compatibility. To unexpected connections, he toasted. Blake raised his own glass. And to the songs that reveal them. Princess Seraphina, seated between them, smiled. My father has asked our archivist to compile all references to Earth in our oldest records. We believe your grandfather's songs may have connections to ancient Velosian migration chants. I'd like to hear those, Blake said. Maybe there are more connections we haven't discovered yet. Undoubtedly, the king agreed. Our geneticists are already identifying other humans with the royal marker. Scattered, but present across your world. And what of the dissidents? Blake asked. The question had been bothering him all day. The king's skin darkened slightly. They will be dealt with according to our laws. But their cause has been substantially weakened. It is difficult to argue against alliance with a species that shares our royal bloodline. And, the princess added with a hint of mischief in her voice, there are rumors that their leader's own genetic testing revealed traces of the same marker. Apparently, our ancient relatives were quite prolific in their interactions with early humans. Blake nearly choked on his drink, earning a ripple of color that he now recognized as Velosian laughter from both royals. As the evening progressed, Blake found himself seated near a window overlooking the embassy gardens. The princess joined him, her formal regalia set aside for simpler attire. Your world is beautiful, she said, gazing at the moonlit landscape. So different from Valos, yet I find it increasingly familiar. I've never left Earth, Blake admitted. Never even left this continent before today's events. Perhaps that will change, the princess said. The genetic connection we share may allow you to visit Valos with fewer adaptations than most humans require. Our atmosphere has elements that are typically toxic to your species, but you might have inherited some of our tolerances. The possibility of visiting an alien world, one he might have some biological connection to, was both thrilling and terrifying. I'd like that, Blake said simply. Then it shall be arranged, she replied. Once the treaty implementations are underway. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then the princess spoke again, her voice softer. Will you sing for me, Blake Turner? Not as a royal treatment or public demonstration. Just as family might sing for family. The request touched something deep in Blake's heart. He thought of his grandfather, of quiet evenings on the porch, of melodies passed down through generations, melodies that, incredibly, might have originated among the stars. He began to sing an old lullaby. The words were English, but as his voice filled the room, he wondered what language they might have been in originally, countless millennia ago when humans and Velosians were somehow, inconceivably, one people. The princess's eyes drifted closed, her skin shifting to the peaceful blues of deep relaxation. Around them, the other Volosians in the room stilled, their attention drawn to the simple human melody that resonated with something cellular in their being. In that moment, Blake Turner, janitor, father, contractor, and now officially recognized kin to alien royalty, felt the universe shrink and expand simultaneously. The vast distances between stars seemed both immense and insignificant against the evidence that connections could span not just space, but time itself. His voice carried through the embassy, no longer just a humble humming to pass the time while mopping, but a bridge between worlds that had always been there, waiting to be rediscovered. Months later, as Earth's relationship with the Volosians blossomed into the cornerstone of humanity's place in the galactic community, Blake would stand on the surface of Valos itself, breathing its air with only minimal filtration, and sing those ancient songs in the sacred caves where they might have originated. Emma would go on to lead the joint Human-Volosian genetic research program, uncovering more connections between their species and revolutionizing both human and Volosian medicine. And throughout the galaxy, the story would be told of the human janitor who hummed while mopping, not knowing that his voice would awaken not just an alien princess, but the slumbering truth of humanity's oldest cosmic connection. But for now, in the quiet of the embassy suite, Blake simply sang, his voice carrying the unintentional magic that had turned the mundane act of cleaning empty hallways into the foundation for humanity's greatest interstellar alliance. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.